Jeremiah 32 and 33. Well, let's go back to 31 to again describe how Jeremiah is going to be defining not the end of the 70 years, that's 586 to 516, but how do we know when exile, how do we know when Israel's exile is over? That is Jeremiah's discussion. By the way, how we understand this, again, is so important in my estimation for how we will understand the New Testament story. Because we often think of the New Testament as very different from the Old Testament, but really what the Old Testament or the New Testament will be doing, in my estimation, is fulfilling Jeremiah's prophecy of these important chapters. Well, 31:1, at that time, says the Lord, I will be the God of all the families of Israel. It's interesting, it doesn't say all the families of the earth, but all the families of Israel. It has sometimes been thought or even taught that Israel will be substituted for Christians in the New Testament, that Christianity substitutes back in for the Old Testament story of Israel. I wouldn't say that. I would say clearly what's going on in the story of the Old Testament is that Israel retains the name. We're going to be calling it Israel, Judah, Ephraim, and so forth. But clearly by verses like this, we have a prediction that there is going to be a redefinition for how that family of Israel will look. Of course, it starts with Abraham in Genesis 12, one individual who is loyal to Yahweh, and from that individual we have a family. Well, how that family will be redefined over time is largely the story of what we're seeing here, and that extends, of course, well into the New Testament. It allows us in verse 3 then to say, the Lord has appeared of old to me, saying, yes, I have loved you with an everlasting love. Therefore, with loving kindness I have drawn you. There's that idea again of being able to ask the question, who is the you that God is speaking to? I would say it includes Christians in the end, because we have been able to redefine how the family of Israel will look. 31:7, O Lord, save your people, the remnant of Israel. There again is a picture of why that redefinition is important, because by the time we're done with the story, we are not talking Israel ancestrally, we're talking a remnant, a leftover portion of what Israel is being defined as. The word remnant is only used twice in the New Testament, and it's both by Paul in the book of Romans. In Romans 9:27, Paul is quoting Isaiah 10, and he says, though the number of the children of Israel be as the sand of the sea, the remnant will be saved. The New Testament story is not again how individuals can be right with God. That's solved as early as Genesis 15:6. The story of the New Testament will be how God saves and thus forms the remnant idea. Because again, Paul's interest is how to get the Gentile to understand how they have become part of the inheritance of Israel. In fact, the other reference of remnant is 11:5 of Romans, which is specifically trying to define in very short order how this remnant can be applied to Gentiles, this remnant idea. Romans 11:5, even so then, at this present time, there is a remnant according to the election of favor. Now, Israel was elected by the story that they went through, whether it be Abraham or the Exodus, Torah, and just that entire idea of being saved by God as a people. But now we have an election or a salvation through the election of favor. A lot of our Bibles will have the word grace there, but charis in Greek, the standard understanding of charis, just means to show favor to someone, often because of a reason. And there it is that I think what's happening in Paul's mind is that the Gentiles are being added to the family through this election of just pure favor. God's saying, if you're loyal to Jesus, that is enough to be elect in the New Testament era. So that's how the word remnant will be used in the New Testament. But for now, again, Jeremiah is predicting a day to come when Yahweh will save a remnant. Well, 31:31, very important passage. Behold, the days are coming, says the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel. This is the only reference to the phrase new covenant in the Old Testament, Jeremiah 31:31. Of course, this implies an old covenant, and that old covenant is in 32, verse 32, not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day that I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt, my covenant which they broke. The only problem with the old covenant, so says Jeremiah, as he says here, is that they broke it. And of course, the breaking of that covenant through Moses was their idolatrous ways, through their choice of worshiping other gods. Well, what will be the picture of the new covenant? It's in verse 33. And this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel, that is the redefined Israel, all the families of Israel. After those days, says the Lord, I will put my law in their minds and write it on their hearts, and I will be their God, and they will be my people. No more shall every man teach his neighbor, saying, Know Yahweh, for they shall all know me. I think that just the general picture of those words is that we will have a time to come, so says Jeremiah, that Israel, the remnant, will show their loyalty to Yahweh from the heart, from an internal drive, as it were, and everyone of this group will know Yahweh as their God. Also, two more things that come from this. From the least of them to the greatest of them, says the Lord, for then I will forgive their iniquity. Remember how the idea of forgiveness comes into the story of Israel. It's not the way to get into the family to ask God to forgive you. It's the privilege of those who are in the family that they are forgiven. So forgiveness is a responsiveness of Yahweh to the people who are loyal to Him. And then it ends by, this is in verse 34 again, and their sin I will remember no more. What's important to catch there is that the word sin is in singular. It's not an issue of asking God to forgive their sins, plural. It's an issue that God will forgive the sin of idolatry that has brought them into this problem of exile, and that sin, because of now their loyalty, will be forgotten, as it were. Well, in chapter 32, Jeremiah buys a field, and he takes the deed that he is given, proving his purchase of the field. He puts it in a earthen vessel and buries it as a picture of Israel coming back someday and digging up that deed, as it were, as though they're coming back to their land that they own. And then in chapter 33, 15, I want to mention one more thing. In those days, at that time, Jeremiah says, God says through him, I will cause to grow up to David a branch of righteousness. He shall execute judgment and righteousness in the earth. In those days, Judah will be saved. The picture of David, again, is that he's gone, so it must be someone who is filling in the slot of David. And of course, that's the king that the great king of the past that was necessary to the story is now being predicted as a necessity in the future. Verse 17, for thus says the Lord, David shall never lack a man to sit on the throne of the house of Israel. So what is the necessity of the Messiah? We would say, at least from this text here, it's built on the necessity of David himself to the story of Israel in the past. So in this story, the exile will be over when there is a king that is sitting on the throne from the branch or the line of David.